what type of compromise would you be willing to entertain to pass common sense gun legislation? Because what you had recommended to him, Senator Creed Deeds offered as an amendment to SB 109, and you still voted against the bill. And
As I told him I would.
Right. So what would you entertain? Because as we see recently, there's a lot more gun violence going on in this country. I understand we have to deal with mental health, but we also have to deal with the issue of guns.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear what her
the question was, what sort of gun control would I accept?
Oh, okay.
And anything that really qualified as gun control is not likely to be well received by me. Can there be trade-offs? Yeah, possibly. The item I mentioned to Mr. Samaha was off the top of my head as we were sitting there, and it was an improvement on the bill. And the bill we're talking about is Senate Bill 109, which would have required private sellers at gun shows to perform background checks, or to team up with a dealer to perform background checks. Right now, licensed dealers have to do the background checks and the paperwork and so forth.
Excuse me, I need to get into this class.
Okay, sure. The Maha or any of Virginia Tech folks, but with the people that have been there year after year, and this bill has been to us many times, is that this is a step down a path that ends in gun registration and the snuffing out of Second Amendment rights. And that's the goal. It is not everybody's goal. It wasn't the goal, as far as I could tell, of any of the folks that I met with beforehand. But when we were in committee, you know, Josh Horowitz, who was testifying on behalf of one of the gun control groups, said, was asked, you know, is this the goal? Is this the end point, or will you be back next year to take the next step here? And his answer, in a very cagey but honest enough fashion, was, well, I can't tell you that I won't be back to do more next year. And the reality is that on any issue of principle like this, and the pro-choice people do it on abortion. They don't want to do anything, even things that appear to everybody to make sense, because they don't want to take a single step down that path. And first of all, this gun show bill would not have addressed crime. The biggest study on the subject was done by the Clinton administration. They traced 16,000 guns used in crimes, and 0.7% of them came from gun shows. What they didn't do is they didn't break down which of those were legal sales and which were illegal sales, and which would have been very helpful. And the reality is that in the years we've been considering this bill, and this is not the first year it's come up, as I've said, I think that we've seen it 4 times in my 6 sessions, 3 or 4 times, in one form or another, is that it wouldn't have an effect. I mean, this is feel-good legislation. And this past weekend, it's one of the things we argue about in these debates is just about the information. So I went to the gun show at the Dulles Expo Center this past weekend, the biggest gun show east of Louisville, Kentucky. And they allowed me to videotape the entire, every display. And with one of the proprietors, I walked up and down every single row and aisle. And there were over 1,000 vendor tables at the show. That's how big it was. Now, a lot of those people are selling jewelry or historical stuff or clothes or books, or, you know, the gun show has got a lot more going on. It is a minority of the folks there that are actually selling guns. But for everyone who is selling guns, we checked with each one of them, and they've never answered this for just me. Annette Elliott, who was one of the proprietors of the show, went around with me and really facilitated getting this information. All of those selling any guns at all were licensed except 6. Of the 6, we talked to 3 of them, you know, just what are you doing? They didn't look any different by and large from anybody else that had displays set up. And all 3 of them said that they were liquidating private collections. They were selling their own stuff, which means they sell less than 25 a year. The one person I asked how many he had sold 5 of his guns. Of the 6, only 1 had any handguns. Of his handguns, only 1 was a modern handgun. It was a Sig Sauer 9mm, $550. The others were like a nickel-plated 6-shooter and, you know, kind of pretty pieces if you like guns. But that was what we found there. And these are people who were reluctant to answer a question, are you licensed or not, because A, they feel a little bit under the spotlight. That's the primary reason, I would think. But because I had a net with me, they were willing to talk to us. And some of them actually have their licenses out on the table. You can just see it. Not all of them do. But the idea to do that came from Annette when I talked to her Saturday night. They had done that at a Roanoke gun show with a reporter, and they found 1 unlicensed dealer, and that was about 6 months ago. So, you know, the notion that there's this big traffic at gun shows is just a misnomer. That is one of the top 5 in just pure size gun shows in the country. And there were 6 people there selling guns that were not licensed. Now, mind you, if you know, pass one on to your son or sell one to your neighbor or what have you, there's no background check. This was an attempt just at gun shows. And I would also point out, Illinois has exactly this kind of legislation in place. And this week still happened in Illinois. And you know, it was about mental health there. It wasn't about gun shows. And thus far, I'm unaware of anybody who would have been stopped by a background check that has committed any of the kinds of crimes that have brought a lot of this legislation forward. I am not inclined to suggest taking a position that would compromise or lead to compromise in Second Amendment rights. Would I consider something where there was a trade-off? Yes, I would. But you know, I'm not prepared to lay a compromise on the table now because that isn't how I negotiate. I mean, frankly, if we're going to get to that point on the bill, we'll do it on the bill. I'm not going to take a position now because I know as a professional negotiator that that's where you start backing off of. So, is it possible in the future? You bet. But I didn't see a proposal this go around. And I'm not talking about the proposal that Deeds made was less of the same. I'm talking about something like guaranteeing faculty members and staff the ability to carry who have concealed carry permits. That's the kind of compromise I'm talking about, where each side gets something it wants. But until we're doing that, I have a hard time foreseeing supporting such legislation. I've got some other things.